A man helps a dying stray dog. You won't believe what happened next. The sun had not yet peaked over the horizon when the first rays of light began to illuminate the dirt roads of the small town of Oakville. Situated on the banks of a serene river in the American heartland, the town was slowly awakening to another day that promised to be like so many others. The aroma of freshly brewed coffee mingled with the smell of homemade bread, escaping through the windows of simple and welcoming houses. Old Joe, owner of the town's only grocery store, was already up, sweeping the sidewalk in front of his establishment. At 65 years old, he was always the first to wake and the last to retire. His graying hair and time-worn face told stories of a life dedicated to this community. "Good morning, Joe," greeted Martha, a plump lady passing by carrying a basket of fresh eggs. "Don't you ever get tired of being up so early?" Joe smiled, leaning on his broom. "Good morning, Martha. Work doesn't wait and the store doesn't open itself," he replied good-humoredly. As they chatted, an unusual movement at the end of Main Street caught both their attention. A staggering figure was approaching, dragging itself with difficulty. As the distance decreased, they realized it was a large dog, its coat once shiny, now dull and caked with mud. "Oh my goodness!" exclaimed Martha, bringing her hand to her mouth. "Just look at that poor thing." The dog, a sizable mutt, seemed to have traveled a long and arduous journey. Its skin was marked by small wounds, and its eyes, though tired, shone with a mixture of fear and hope. Stumbling, it approached Joe and Martha, as if begging for help. Joe, known for his generous heart, didn't hesitate. "Martha, go fetch some water, please. I'll see if I have something for this little fella to eat." While Martha ran to get water, Joe quickly entered his grocery store. He rummaged through the shelves and found a piece of bologna that had been left over from the day before. "It's not much, but it should help," he muttered to himself. Returning to the sidewalk, Joe slowly crouched down, extending his hand with the food. The dog, initially hesitant, sniffed the air and cautiously approached. Gently, it took the bologna from Joe's hand and devoured it in seconds. "Easy there, buddy," Joe said softly. "There's more where that came from." At that moment, Martha returned with a bowl of fresh water. The dog, sensing no threat, drank eagerly, as if it hadn't seen water in days. "Poor thing," whispered Martha. "Looks like it's come from far away. Look how thin and hurt it is." As the sun rose in the sky, more residents began to leave their houses, noticing the unusual scene. Soon, a small group formed around the dog, all expressing concern and offering help. "Folks, we need to do something," said Tony the baker. "We can't leave the poor thing in this state." "I agree," added Zelda, a lady known for her skill with needle and thread. "It needs a bath and care. Who knows if it's not hurt inside too?" While they discussed what to do, the dog, apparently feeling safer, lay down at Joe's feet, exhausted. Its gaze, once frightened, now conveyed silent gratitude. "Well, for now it stays with me," Joe decided. "I have a corner in the back of the store where it can rest. Then we'll think about what to do." Carefully, Joe guided the dog to the back of his store, improvising a bed with cardboard boxes and an old blanket. The animal, grateful, settled in and fell asleep almost instantly. Throughout the day, news about the mysterious dog spread through the town like wildfire. Curious children passed by the store, hoping to catch a glimpse of the new inhabitant. Adults brought leftover food and offered help. At the end of the afternoon, when the bustle in the store had died down, Joe sat next to the dog, which was now awake and more alert. "So, buddy," he spoke softly, "where did you come from? What story do you have to tell?" The dog just looked at him, tilting its head as if trying to understand. Joe smiled, scratching behind the animal's ear. "Well, you need a name. How about Charlie?" "Yeah, you look like a Charlie." The dog, as if approving the name, wagged its tail slightly. "Charlie it is then," Joe chuckled. That night, as the town prepared for sleep, a new energy hung in the air. Charlie's unexpected arrival had touched something in the hearts of Oakville's residents. It was as if, somehow, everyone felt that life in the small community was about to change. Joe, before retiring, looked once more at Charlie, who was now sleeping peacefully. "Rest, friend," he whispered. "Tomorrow will be a new day." And so, under the starry sky of the heartland, the town fell asleep, not knowing that the arrival of a simple stray dog was about to transform their lives in ways no one could imagine. The days following Charlie's arrival brought a new routine to Oakville. The small town, previously accustomed to its quiet and predictable rhythm, now pulsed with a different energy. The large, gangly mutt that had appeared so mysteriously had become the center of attention and care in the community. Joe, who had initially offered temporary shelter in the back of his grocery store, realized that his connection with Charlie was growing each day. Every morning, even before opening the doors to customers, Joe would head to the makeshift kennel to check on how his new friend had spent the night. "Good morning, buddy," he would say, scratching Charlie's ears. "Ready for another day?" The dog, who day by day regained his strength, would respond with an enthusiastic tail wag and a look that seemed to overflow with gratitude. News about the rescued dog spread quickly, and soon Joe's grocery store became an informal meeting point for residents who wanted to help. Zelda, with her skilled hands, crafted a colorful collar for Charlie, decorated with small bells that jingled cheerfully with every movement. "Now that's more like it," she said, adjusting the collar around Charlie's neck. "You're dressed to impress." The town's children, fascinated by the new four-legged resident, spent hours playing with him in the small yard behind the grocery store. Charlie, although still a bit cautious, seemed to flourish with the attention and affection he received. Emily, a 12-year-old girl known for her passion for drawing, spent an entire afternoon sitting next to Charlie, scribbling in her notebook. "Look, Mr. Joe," she exclaimed, proudly showing her work. "I made a portrait of Charlie." The drawing, though simple, perfectly captured the essence of the dog: his gentle eyes, curious snout, and always alert ears. Joe smiled, genuinely impressed. "It's beautiful, Emily. I think we've found Charlie's official artist." As the days passed, it became clear that Charlie would need more specialized medical care. His wounds, though not severe, were not healing as quickly as they should, and his thinness persisted despite regular feeding. It was then that Sarah, the young veterinarian from the neighboring town, entered the scene. Having heard about the rescued dog through clients visiting her clinic, she offered to examine Charlie free of charge. On a sunny Saturday afternoon, Sarah arrived in town, her blue pickup truck catching the attention of children playing in the square. Carrying a worn leather bag, she headed to Joe's grocery store, where a small crowd had already formed, eager to see what would happen. "Good afternoon, Mr. Joe," Sarah greeted with a warm smile. "Where's our special patient?" Joe guided her to the back, where Charlie was resting in the shade of an oak tree. Seeing a stranger approach, the dog stood up, alert but not aggressive. "Easy there, buddy," Joe murmured, patting Charlie's head. "She's here to help." Sarah crouched down, letting Charlie sniff her hand before beginning the examination. With gentle gestures and reassuring words, she managed to gain the animal's trust, who remained surprisingly calm throughout the process. After an hour of thorough examination, Sarah stood up, her face a mixture of concern and determination. "Well, I have good news and bad news," she said, addressing Joe and the other residents who were anxiously waiting. "The good news is that Charlie is a strong and resilient dog. He has survived conditions that would have defeated many others." There was a collective sigh of relief, but everyone knew there was more to come. "The bad news," Sarah continued, "is that he needs constant care for a good while. He's malnourished, has some infections that need to be treated, and frankly, he needs a more suitable environment to fully recover." A heavy silence fell over the group. The idea that Charlie might need to leave the town to receive proper care was painful for everyone. It was Tony, the baker, who broke the silence. What if we took turns caring for him? We could follow your instructions, Dr. Sarah." The suggestion was met with enthusiastic nods and murmurs of agreement. Sarah smiled, visibly touched by the community's dedication. "That could work, but we'd need a well-organized plan. Medications, special diet, controlled exercise. It won't be easy. We'll figure it out," Joe stated with conviction. "Charlie is part of our family now." In the weeks that followed, Oakville transformed into a veritable canine rehabilitation center. Following Sarah's detailed instructions, the residents took turns caring for Charlie. Martha prepared nutritious meals following a special diet. Tony reserved the best pieces of whole wheat bread for the town's new friend. The children, under adult supervision, took charge of daily walks, always careful not to overdo the intensity. Charlie, in turn, seemed to flourish with all the care and attention. His coat, once dull and lifeless, began to regain its shine. His eyes, once tired, now sparkled with energy and curiosity. He had become a constant presence in the life of the town, accompanying Joe on his morning deliveries, resting in the shade of the church during hot afternoons and playing with the children in the evening. One afternoon, as Charlie napped in his makeshift bed in the back of the grocery store, Joe observed him with a mixture of pride and concern. You know, Charlie," he murmured, more to himself than to the dog, "you've brought us something we didn't even know we needed. But what will we do when you're fully recovered?" The question hung in the air, unanswered. Joe knew that at some point they would have to make a decision about Charlie's future. The town, as welcoming as it was, might not be the best place for a dog of his size in the long term. That night, as the full moon bathed Oakville in its silvery light, the residents fell asleep with conflicting thoughts. The joy of seeing Charlie recover mixed with apprehension about what the future held for their newest and dearest resident. What no one knew was that fate had its own plans for Charlie and the small riverside town. Plans that would test the strength of newly formed bonds and reveal the true character not just of a dog, but of an entire community. Autumn arrived in Oakville, bringing with it cooler winds and a sky that alternated between crystal-clear blue and heavy clouds. The change of seasons also brought a remarkable transformation in Charlie. The dog that had arrived months ago, weak and malnourished, now displayed a majestic bearing. His coat, once dull, shone under the autumn sun, and his eyes conveyed a contagious liveliness. Charlie had become a beloved and indispensable figure in the town's routine. Every morning, he accompanied Joe on his walk to the grocery store, greeting residents with cheerful barks and tail wags. The children, who used to drag their feet to school, now raced to see who could give Charlie a hug first before classes. On one of these mornings, as Joe was organizing the shelves in the store, Charlie suddenly perked up his ears, alert. His nose pointed towards the window, and a slight growl escaped his throat. "What is it, buddy?" Joe asked, intrigued by the dog's unusual behavior. Charlie walked to the door, scratching it lightly as if asking to go out. Joe, curious, opened the door and watched the dog walk to the middle of the street, staring fixedly at the horizon. In the sky, dark clouds were gathering, denser and more threatening than normal for that time of year. A cool breeze blew, making the leaves on the trees dance restlessly. "Looks like rain's coming," Joe muttered to himself, frowning. Throughout the day, the sky grew increasingly heavy. The residents, accustomed to seasonal rains, began taking precautions. Windows were closed, clothes were brought in from clotheslines, and children were called inside earlier than usual. By nightfall, when the first drops began to fall, Charlie was becoming increasingly agitated. He paced back and forth from the grocery store door to the street, occasionally barking at the dark sky. "Easy, Charlie," Joe tried to calm him, but something in the dog's behavior left him uneasy. It was around midnight that the storm really broke loose. The rain fell in dense sheets, accompanied by gusts of wind that howled between the houses. Thunder rumbled in the sky, momentarily illuminating the night with bluish flashes. Charlie, unable to calm down, began to bark incessantly. Joe, concerned, decided to take a look outside. When he opened the store door, he was greeted by a gust of wind and rain that nearly knocked him over. "Good Lord!" he exclaimed, struggling to close the door again. At that moment, Charlie seized the opportunity and escaped into the rain-soaked street. Joe tried to call him back, but his voice was swallowed by the roar of the storm. "Charlie, come back here, you crazy mutt," Joe shouted, grabbing a coat and heading out after the dog. The scene he found outside was chaotic. The rain was falling so intensely that it was difficult to see more than a few feet ahead. The dirt roads had turned into muddy little rivers, and the sound of rushing water was deafening. Joe spotted Charlie running towards the river that bordered the town. With his heart racing, he followed the dog, slipping and stumbling in the mud. As he approached the riverbank, Joe realized with horror that the waters had risen considerably. The normally calm watercourse was now a furious torrent, its banks dangerously overflowing. "Charlie!" he shouted again, finally reaching the dog. But Charlie wasn't alone. Beside him, clinging to a half-submerged branch, was Annie, Martha's 7-year-old daughter. The girl, with eyes wide with terror, was struggling to stay above water. Without hesitation, Joe waded into the icy water, fighting against the current. Charlie, surprisingly, plunged in beside him, swimming determinedly towards the girl. "Hold on, Annie!" Joe shouted, stretching out his arm to reach her. With a joint effort, Joe and Charlie managed to reach the girl. Joe grabbed her firmly, while Charlie, with surprising strength, pulled at Joe's coat, helping them back to the shore. As soon as they set foot on solid ground, they heard shouts coming from the town. Flashlights cut through the darkness, and soon a group of residents arrived running, led by Martha. "My baby! My Annie!" she cried, taking the drenched girl into her arms. As the residents huddled around, expressing relief and gratitude, Joe looked at Charlie. The dog, soaked and panting, remained alert, his eyes still fixed on the turbulent river. "You knew, didn't you, buddy?" Joe murmured, patting Charlie's wet head. "You sensed something was wrong." At that moment, as the rain continued to fall and the river roared in the background, something changed in the residents' perception of Charlie. He was no longer just the rescued dog, the town's adorable mascot. He was a hero, a protector. News of the rescue spread quickly, even with the storm still raging. Residents of houses closest to the river began to evacuate, taking only essentials with them. The town, which hours earlier had been sleeping peacefully, was now in full activity, united against nature's fury. And at the center of it all was Charlie. The dog seemed tireless, running from one side to the other, barking to alert of imminent dangers, guiding people to higher ground. Joe, soaked and exhausted, watched with a mixture of pride and admiration. "Who would have thought," he mused, that scared dog who showed up at our door would become the town's guardian?" As the night wore on and the storm slowly lost strength, the residents of Oakville gathered in the church hall, the highest point in town. Families huddled together, sharing blankets and words of comfort, and there in the midst of them, lying down but always alert, was Charlie. Joe sat down next to the dog, running his hand through its still damp fur. "You really are special, you know," he whispered. Charlie looked at Joe, his eyes conveying an almost human understanding. At that moment, under the roof of the old church, with the sound of rain diminishing outside, Joe understood that Charlie wasn't just a dog they had rescued. He was a gift, a living reminder that sometimes in the most unexpected moments and in the most surprising ways, we find exactly what we need. The storm would eventually pass, leaving behind destruction and challenges, but it would also leave something more, a more united community, and the certainty that in Charlie they had found not just a mascot, but a true four-legged hero. The days following the storm were ones of intense work and cooperation in Oakville. The sun, which finally reappeared after 3 days of heavy rain, illuminated a transformed landscape. Damaged houses, muddy streets, and fallen trees were silent witnesses to nature's fury. However, amidst the destruction, a spirit of solidarity flourished. Residents of all ages gathered in work groups, clearing debris, repairing roofs, and helping the most affected neighbors. And at the center of all this activity, like a constant and comforting presence, was Charlie. The dog, who just a few months ago was a battered stranger, was now seen as a symbol of hope and resilience. He accompanied the work groups, seeming to instinctively understand where his presence was most needed. Here, helping to pull a cart full of debris. There, offering silent comfort to a child frightened by the noise of the repairs. Joe, observing all this with a mixture of pride and admiration, commented to Zelda as they both worked on rebuilding a fence. "You know, Zelda, sometimes I think it was Charlie who rescued us, not the other way around." Zelda smiled, wiping the sweat from her brow with an embroidered handkerchief. "It's true, Joe. That dog brought something special to our town. Something we didn't even know we needed." As the weeks passed and the town gradually returned to normalcy, the story of Charlie and his heroic role during the storm began to spread beyond the limits of Oakville. Journalists from neighboring cities appeared, eager to meet the hero dog and report on his incredible journey. Sarah, the veterinarian who had become a frequent visitor since Charlie's rescue, arrived one afternoon with exciting news. "Folks, you won't believe it," she exclaimed, gathering a small group in the town square. "Charlie's story has reached the ears of a major national television network. They want to do a report on him and the town." The news was received with a mixture of enthusiasm and apprehension. On one hand, the residents felt proud that their small community and canine hero were being recognized. On the other, there were concerns about how this sudden attention would affect their quiet life. "And what will happen to Charlie after this?" asked Tony, the baker, expressing the concern that many felt but hesitated to verbalize. "What if someone wants to take him away?" A heavy silence fell over the group. The idea of losing Charlie was too painful to contemplate. It was Emily, the young artist who had drawn Charlie's first portrait, who broke the silence. What What if we did something to show that Charlie belongs here, that this is his home? The girl's eyes sparkled with enthusiasm as she continued. We could create a mural, a big mural at the entrance of the town, with Charlie's portrait and scenes of how he helped us during the storm. The idea was met with enthusiastic approval. In the days that followed, as they waited for the television crew to arrive, the town mobilized around the mural project. Emily led a group of local artists, transforming the outer wall of the abandoned old train station into a giant canvas. The mural gradually took shape, revealing scenes of Charlie's arrival in town, his rescue of Annie during the flood, and images of his comforting presence during the reconstruction efforts. At the center of it all was a majestic portrait of Charlie, his eyes full of kindness and courage. When the television crew finally arrived, they were amazed not only by Charlie's story, but by the love and dedication the community demonstrated. The report, which aired nationally, showed not just the heroism of a dog, but the transformative power that an act of kindness can have on an entire community. The cameras captured Charlie proudly walking alongside Joe, lovingly interacting with the town's children, and sitting majestically in front of the mural that told his story. The reporter, visibly moved, concluded the piece by saying, "In Oakville, we discovered that sometimes the greatest heroes come in unexpected packages. Charlie, a simple mutt who arrived here a few months ago, proved that true heroism lies in the heart, not in breed or pedigree." In the days following the broadcast, the town was flooded with messages of support and admiration from all over the country. People offered donations to help with reconstruction. Others wanted to know how they could adopt stray dogs inspired by Charlie's story. Amidst all this commotion, Joe realized it was time to make an important decision. Gathering the residents in the town square, he made an announcement. "Friends, I think we all agree that Charlie has become more than just a mascot for our town. He's family, and family needs a permanent home." There were murmurs of agreement, and Joe continued. "That's why I'd like to officially propose the creation of Charlie's home. Not just a shelter for him, but a place where we can care for other abandoned or lost animals we find." The proposal was met with enthusiastic applause. In the weeks that followed, with the help of donations and volunteer work from residents, a plot of land near the square was transformed. A welcoming structure was built, with space for Charlie and other animals in need of care. On the day of the inauguration of Charlie's home, the entire town gathered for a special celebration. Charlie, wearing a blue bandana specially made by Zelda, seemed to understand the importance of the moment. He walked among the residents, receiving pets and treats, his tail wagging non-stop. When Joe cut the inaugural ribbon, there were applause and tears of joy. Charlie, as if understanding that this moment was about him, let out a cheerful bark that echoed across the square. That night, as the town prepared for sleep after the festivities, Joe sat on the porch of his house, Charlie lying at his feet. Looking at the stars, he reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. "You know, Charlie," he murmured, scratching behind the dog's ears, "when you showed up that morning, I thought we were saving you. But the truth is, you saved us in many ways." Charlie looked up, his eyes shining in the moonlight, as if he understood every word. And in that moment, under the starry sky of Oakville, man and dog shared a silent understanding. Sometimes, home isn't a place, but the connections we form and the lives we touch along the way. The months following the inauguration of Charlie's home brought a new dynamic to Oakville. What began as a simple shelter for Charlie and other abandoned animals quickly transformed into a reference point not just for the town, but for the entire region. Charlie's home became a place of learning and awareness about animal care and respect. Schools from neighboring towns organized field trips to visit the site, where children could interact with rescued animals and learn about responsibility and compassion. Charlie, now a bit older but still full of energy, naturally assumed the role of host, greeting visitors with tail wags and friendly barks. His gentle and protective behavior with the other animals in the shelter did not go unnoticed, reinforcing his reputation as a canine hero. On a sunny spring afternoon, as Joe supervised a group of visiting children at Charlie's home, he noticed something unusual. Charlie, normally sociable and active, seemed restless. The dog alternated between staring fixedly at the road leading to town and barking softly, as if trying to communicate something. "What's wrong, buddy?" Joe asked, patting Charlie's head. Are you sensing something?" As if in response, Charlie began to walk towards the road, occasionally stopping to look back as if inviting Joe to follow him. Intrigued, Joe asked Zelda to keep an eye on the children and followed Charlie. They walked for about 15 minutes down the dirt road until they reached a curve where the vegetation was denser. It was then that Joe heard it. A weak meow, almost imperceptible. Charlie was already intensely sniffing a bush near the roadside. Carefully, Joe pushed aside the branches and discovered, huddled and shivering, a small calico kitten. "Well, well," Joe murmured, gently picking up the tiny animal in his arms. "What are you doing out here all alone, little one?" The kitten, clearly frightened and hungry, snuggled into Joe's arms. Charlie watched attentively, his tail wagging as if he were proud of his discovery. "Good job, Charlie," Joe praised, patting the dog with his free hand. "Let's take this little one home." Back at Charlie's home, the arrival of the kitten caused a stir. The visiting children were delighted, and soon everyone was involved in caring for the new resident. Sarah, the veterinarian, was called to examine the kitten. After a complete checkup, she declared, "Well, looks like we have a survivor here. She's a bit malnourished and dehydrated, but with proper care, she'll be fine in a few days." While Sarah administered the initial treatments, Joe noticed something curious. Charlie wouldn't leave the kitten's side, watching every movement with a protective gaze. "Look at that," commented Zelda, who was also observing the scene. "Looks like Charlie has adopted the little one." In the days that followed, the relationship between Charlie and the kitten, which was affectionately named Hope by the town's children, strengthened. Charlie watched over her constantly, shared his food, and even allowed her to sleep nestled next to him. This unexpected demonstration of interspecies care did not go unnoticed. Soon, the story of Charlie and Hope's friendship spread, attracting even more attention to Charlie's home. One day, Joe received a surprising phone call. It was from an important animal protection organization from the state capital. "Mr. Joe," said the voice on the other end of the line, "we've heard about Charlie's incredible story and the work you're doing there in Oakville. We'd like to propose a partnership." The proposal was ambitious: expand Charlie's home to become a regional center for animal rescue and rehabilitation. The organization offered financial resources, training, and technical support. Joe was momentarily speechless. It was an incredible opportunity, but also a great challenge. He looked out the window, seeing Charlie gently playing with Hope in the yard. "This would change a lot around here," Joe reflected aloud. "We understand it's an important decision," the organization's representative responded. "Why don't we talk in person? We can send a team to visit the site next week." Joe agreed to receive the visit, but he knew he couldn't make this decision alone. That night, he called a meeting in the town square. All the residents showed up, eager to hear the news. Under the starry sky, with Charlie lying at his feet and Hope nestled in Emily's lap, Joe shared the proposal with the community. "Friends," he began, "we have a unique opportunity on our hands. But this isn't just my decision or Charlie's. It's something that will affect our entire community." The reactions were mixed. Some residents were excited about the prospect of growth and recognition for the town. Others expressed concern about how this could change the quiet character of Oakville. "What if we lose the essence of what we've built here?" Tony questioned. "But think about how many more animals we could help," Sarah, the veterinarian, argued. The debate extended into the night. Opinions were shared, concerns expressed, and dreams envisioned. Throughout it all, Charlie remained attentive, as if understanding the importance of the discussion. Finally, when the moon was high in the sky, Joe stood up again. "Folks, I think we've reached a consensus," he said, looking around at the familiar faces of his neighbors and friends. "We'll receive this team and hear what they have to say. But any decision will be made together, thinking about what's best for our community and for the animals we've sworn to protect." A murmur of approval ran through the crowd. Charlie, as if sensing the importance of the moment, let out a soft bark. As the residents dispersed, returning to their homes, Joe stayed a bit longer in the square, Charlie by his side. Looking at the stars, he reflected on how much their lives had changed since that battered dog had arrived in town. "Who would have thought, huh, buddy?" he murmured, scratching behind Charlie's ears. "Seems like our adventure is far from over." Charlie looked at Joe, his eyes shining with a mixture of affection and anticipation. Together, man and dog contemplated the horizon, where the first rays of the rising sun began to paint the sky pink and gold. It was the beginning of a new day, full of promises and possibilities, not just for them, but for all of Oakville. The week leading up to the visit from the Animal Protection Organization team was filled with anticipation in Oakville. The small town, once known only for its tranquility and hospitality, now buzzed with discussions about the future and the possibilities that were opening up. At the center of it all, as always, was Charlie. The dog seemed to sense the atmosphere of change in the air, remaining more alert and attentive to everything around him. His constant presence by Joe's side was a silent reminder of why they were considering this great transformation. On the morning of the much-anticipated visit, the town woke up in a flurry. Windows were washed, streets swept, and even the old church bell received an extra polish. Charlie's home, of course, received special attention. Volunteers worked tirelessly to make everything impeccable, from the kennels to the newly planted garden. Shortly before noon, a sleek black car entered the town, raising a small cloud of dust on the dirt road. 3 people stepped out: Dr. Claire Sanders, a renowned veterinarian and animal rights activist; Mr. Richard Allen, an expert in shelter management; and Ms. Beatrice Carter, a financial representative from the organization. Joe, accompanied by Charlie, was the first to greet them. "Welcome to Oakville," he said, extending his hand with a warm smile. "I hope you had a good trip." Dr. Claire, a middle-aged woman with kind eyes behind thin-framed glasses, bent down to greet Charlie. The dog, normally reserved with strangers, surprised everyone by immediately approaching her, wagging his tail. "Well, well," Claire smiled, patting Charlie's head. "Looks like the famous hero has given us his approval." The visit began with a tour of Charlie's home. The team was visibly impressed with what they saw. Despite limited resources, the place was clean, well-organized, and above all, welcoming. The animals, from dogs and cats to some rabbits and even a rescued parrot, seemed happy and well cared for. "It's incredible what you've managed to do here," commented Mr. Allen, making notes on his tablet. "I see a lot of potential for expansion." As they walked, Charlie remained always nearby, as if actively participating in the inspection. In a particularly touching moment, he guided the group to the corner where Hope, the rescued kitten, was resting in a cozy basket. "That's a scene you don't see every day," observed Ms. Carter, visibly moved to see Charlie gently nudging Hope with his nose. After the tour, the team met with Joe Serra, the local veterinarian, and some community representatives in the improvised meeting room at the old train station. For almost 2 hours, they discussed plans, numbers, and possibilities. The proposal presented was ambitious: transform Charlie's home into a regional reference center for animal rescue and rehabilitation. This would include building new facilities, hiring specialized staff, and implementing educational programs. "With adequate resources," Dr. Claire explained, "we could triple the care capacity and create a model that could be replicated in other regions." While the adults talked outside, a group of children gathered, curious about the visitors. Emily, the young artist, organized a small impromptu presentation, showing the visitors the drawings the children had made of Charlie and other shelter animals. When the meeting ended and the group stepped out into the sunny street, they were greeted by this charming scene. Children proudly showing their drawings, Charlie sitting patiently while being portrayed, and other residents gathered, eager to hear the news. Dr. Claire, visibly touched, turned to Joe. "Mr. Joe, I came here thinking we would just be expanding a shelter, but I see now that we're facing something much bigger. You've created a community truly committed to animal welfare." The team left late in the afternoon, promising to send a detailed proposal soon. As the car disappeared around the bend in the road, the residents gathered in the town square to discuss their impressions. Opinions varied. Some, like Sarah, were excited about the possibilities for growth and learning. Others, like Tony, expressed concern. "What if we lose control over what we've built here?" he questioned. "What if Charlie's home becomes too big and impersonal?" It was at this moment that Zelda, who had been quiet until then, stood up. With her soft but firm voice, she said, "Friends, remember when Charlie arrived here? He was just a scared and injured dog. We could have simply given him some food and water and sent him on his way. But we chose to open our hearts. And look what happened. We not only saved Charlie, but he saved us in many ways." She paused, looking around at the attentive faces of her neighbors. "Maybe this is our chance to do for other animals and communities what we did for Charlie, to spread a little more kindness in the world." Her words seemed to touch something deep in everyone present. Even those who were hesitant began to see the possibilities in a new light. As night fell over Oakville, the residents dispersed, each reflecting on the future that was opening up before them. Joe stayed a little longer in the square, Charlie faithfully by his side. "What do you think, buddy?" he murmured, scratching behind Charlie's ears. "Are we ready for this new adventure?" Charlie looked at Joe, his eyes full of trust and affection. At that moment, Joe felt a certainty grow in his heart. Regardless of the challenges that might come, they would face them together, as a community united by love and compassion. As the stars began to dot the night sky, Joe and Charlie walked back home. The future was uncertain, but full of promise. And in Oakville, where a simple act of kindness had unleashed a wave of transformation, anything seemed possible. 1 year passed since the visit of the Animal Protection Organization team, and Oakville was unrecognizable. Charlie's home had transformed into a large and modern animal rescue and rehabilitation center, now occupying an area 3 times larger than the original. New buildings with sustainable architecture rose where once there were only empty fields. A veterinary center equipped with cutting-edge technology served not only the rescued animals, but also acted as a reference hospital for the entire region. Next to it, a training school for animal caregivers attracted students from various parts of the country. At the center of it all, as a constant reminder of the project's humble origins, stood Charlie's statue. Sculpted in bronze by a renowned artist, it depicted the faithful dog in his most characteristic pose, sitting, alert, with kind eyes turned towards the horizon as if always on guard. On that sunny spring morning, the town was preparing for a special celebration, the first anniversary of the new Charlie Animal Protection Center. Colorful banners decorated the streets, and the aroma of festive treats filled the air. Joe, now the honorary director of the center, walked slowly down the main avenue, Charlie faithfully by his side. Despite his advanced age, the dog maintained a steady pace, though his muzzle was now sprinkled with white. "Look at this, buddy," Joe murmured, stopping to observe the movement. "Who would have thought we'd come so far?" Charlie looked at his old friend, wagging his tail gently. His eyes, though slightly dimmer with age, still shone with the same kindness and intelligence as always. As they approached the stage set up in the town square, they were greeted by a wave of warm applause. Old and new residents, center staff, students and visitors all gathered to celebrate the incredible journey that had begun with a simple act of compassion. Dr. Claire Sanders, now the executive director of the center, was the first to speak. "A year ago, when I first came to Oakville, I thought we were just expanding a shelter, but what we found here was much more than that. We found a community that deeply understood the meaning of compassion and respect for life in all its forms." She paused, her eyes misting with emotion. "What we've built here isn't just an animal protection center. It's a model of how we can live in harmony with nature and with each other." Throughout the day, various activities took place. There were guided tours of the new facilities, workshops on animal care, and even an adoption fair that resulted in dozens of animals finding new homes. One of the most popular attractions was the Hope Gallery, an art exhibition created by Emily, the young artist who had grown up alongside the project. The walls were covered with portraits of rescued animals, each telling a story of overcoming and love. At the center of the gallery, a special painting caught everyone's attention, a portrait of Charlie and Hope, the kitten he had helped rescue a year ago. In the image, the two were side by side, symbolizing the union and friendship that transcend species. As the afternoon wore on, Joe was called to the stage for a few words. With Charlie by his side, he looked at the crowd, feeling the weight of the moment. "Friends," he began, his voice choked with emotion. "When Charlie showed up in our town that morning, so long ago, we thought we were saving an abandoned dog. But the truth is, Charlie saved us." He paused, stroking Charlie's head. "He taught us about loyalty, courage, and the transformative power of unconditional love. This center, everything we've built here, is a testament to what can happen when we open our hearts." Joe's words were met with emotional applause. Many in the audience wiped away tears, remembering how their own lives had been touched by Charlie's journey. As the sun began to set, painting the sky with shades of orange and pink, the celebration reached its peak. A large photo of Charlie was projected against the facade of the main building, accompanied by a montage of images that told his story, from the day he arrived thin and scared to the hero he became. As soft music played and people hugged, sharing memories and dreams for the future, Joe stepped away from the crowd a bit. He found a quiet bench overlooking the entire complex and sat down, Charlie settling at his feet. "You know, Charlie," Joe said softly, "when you showed up that morning, I was just an old grocery store owner living a simple life. I never imagined we'd be here making such a big difference." Charlie looked up, his eyes meeting Joe's. In that moment, man and dog shared a deep understanding that went beyond words. "Thank you, my friend," Joe whispered, his voice barely containing the emotion. "Thank you for showing us the way." As the stars began to dot the night sky, Joe reflected on the incredible journey they had taken. From a simple act of kindness, something extraordinary had been born. Not just an animal protection center, but a transformed community, united by love and compassion. Charlie's legacy, he realized, wasn't just the center or the animals saved. It was the change he had inspired in people's hearts, living proof that even the smallest acts of kindness can create waves of transformation that extend far beyond what we can imagine. As night fell over Oakville, the lights of the center shone like a beacon of hope. And there, sitting quietly under the starry sky, a man and his dog contemplated the future with hearts full of gratitude and the certainty that, as long as there is compassion in the world, there will always be hope.